After making a handful of videos about philosophy and theology on my personal channel, I've decided to make a separate dedicated channel where I'll post any content I make about philosophy, mathematics, and physics. This will be a fairly short video just to kick things off. Plantinga is a famous and well-regarded Christian philosopher who gave a lecture a couple decades ago titled 24 or so Theistic Arguments. Although I don't think the original lecture was recorded, we're going to look at a more recent video in which Plantinga describes one of these arguments, which is the argument from collections, or the argument from sets. I've also included a link to Plantinga's original lecture notes in the description. I'm just going to run the whole 2-minute clip, and then we'll look through it in more detail.
Describe briefly, say, metaphysical arguments. What are some of those?
Well, here's an interesting example of a metaphysical argument. It's an argument about sets. Mm-hmm. And a very common way to think about sets is like this, that there's a whole stratified structure of sets, so that at the bottom layer there are non-sets, just objects, whatever, numbers, for example, other objects. At the next level, sets of those things. At the next level, sets of the first two levels, at the next level, and so on. So there's a stratified hierarchy of sets, first. And then secondly, sets have their members essentially, so that a given set, let's say the unit set of Socrates, a set that got only Socrates in it, that could not have existed but not had Socrates as a member. It couldn't have been the null set, and it couldn't also, instead have had you in it, or me in it, or maybe all three of us, you and me and Socrates. It's got its members essentially. Now, the idea that goes along with that as to what a set would be a collection, a collecting together on the part of a mind. So this is the way Cantor thought of it, the great set theorist, the inventor of modern set theory, Georg Cantor. A set is a matter of a mind collecting some things together, thinking these things in one thought. So I might look at my four fingers and think of them together in one thought. And thereby, that's what thereby is a set. But there are so many sets, and some of them are so complicated that they couldn't possibly be collections on the part of human beings, say the set of the natural numbers, or some very sort of diverse set of elements from the set of real numbers. No human being could think all those things together, have them before their minds at one time. So if sets really are collections and have to be collected in that fashion, there would have to be some supermind, something like God, in order to collect them.
Let's break this down step by step. First, the idea that a collection or set is simply something that a mind is thinking of is just asserted by Plantinga here. I know that this is just an overview he's giving, so maybe he does have a deeper explanation, and I'm fine with assuming it for the sake of argument. It's just important to point this out. Second, though, this still falls prey to a pretty basic conflation. When we talk about a mathematical or a philosophical concept, there is a difference between the concept or the representation we have of it in our mind and the actual ontological structure that we're describing. If sets or numbers were only concepts and had no meaningful relation to the rest of the external world, then there wouldn't really be much use for them in describing the external world. If I have 3 apples, there is the mathematical idea in my head of the number 3, and then there's the actual relation between the actual things in the world that I am accurately describing with the number 3. So when Plantinga says,
a set is a matter of a mind collecting some things together, thinking these things in one thought.
He's appealing to the conceptual structure of a set in someone's thoughts. But when he says,
but there are so many sets, and some of them are so complicated that they couldn't possibly be collections on the part of human beings, say the set of the natural numbers.
He's appealing to the ontological structure of things in the real world and their relations to each other. In fact, I think he pulls the rug out from underneath himself immediately after this when he says,
no human being could think all those things together, have them before their minds at one time. So if sets really are collections and have to be collected in that fashion, there would have to be some supermind, something like God.
At a basic level, this just doesn't make any sense to me. If sets are only something that a mind is thinking of at a particular moment, then some complex set of natural numbers, like Plantinga described, isn't a set until somebody thinks of it. So why would we need a supermind to be thinking of all sets at once if Plantinga just told us that those sets don't exist if they are not being thought of? They only become sets once they're defined as such by a mind. We don't need to account for the existence of things that don't exist if nobody's thinking of them. As an aside, arguments that use reasoning like this,
If sets really are collections and have to be collected in that fashion, there would have to be some supermind, something like God.
are exactly why atheists will often argue against a concept of God that's basically like a human being turned up to 11. Many theistic philosophers and theologians will often chide atheists for attacking a very simplistic and anthropocentric idea of God, but then they come up with arguments like this. Human minds can think of some sets, but there are more sets than people can think of. So to think of all the sets, you would need an even better mind. This type of thinking is just not very imaginative. It attempts to explain things by using the same concepts, but moving them along some linear sliding scale of power or capability. It's the type of thinking that leads to misconceptions like the Big Bang just being basically like a chemical explosion, but really big. In reality, however, the concept of a set and the reality it describes are just not the same thing. Thanks for watching.